Keely's been pretty hard on his machine here. All the wheel bearings are shot on it. A-arm bushings are shot. We're going to change those out. He blew a shock when we were out playing in the mud. Blew the spring on it as well, kind of wore through the shock, blew a hole in that. So we've got to replace that out. So good old Ranger here. It's going to get a little bit of maintenance today. Let's do it. Keely's a little hard on this machine, but you know, it's built for what it is that he does. He does a lot of plowing in the winter. Those tracks that he uses, lots of side force on there, so those bearings take a bit of a beating. We'll get into that right now. Now you can actually see the movement in that bearing. Lots of play in there. So between the bearing, other little parts and pieces that are loose, this front end's pretty sloppy. Now we'll get that caliper off. So I've got that brake caliper off. Now I'm going to disassemble everything else because I've got to take those A-arms out so I can change those bushings. Got to get this off so I can get the hub bearing out of it. So it's basically just a disassembly process. Now there's a little plastic retaining clip in here that holds that brake caliper line on to the top A-arm. You're going to want to take that off because the A-arm's going to drop and you don't want any stress on your brake line. Pop that tie rod end off. I always replace the washer and the nut back on the tie rod end. That way I'm not digging around and I'll know for sure what goes where. These upper and lower A-arm retaining bolts off. Make sure you're holding these when you pull those retaining bolts out because, you know, they will just drop right out of your hand. Now it's splined on the end, so just using thumb pressure, I just sort of pop that axle right out. And it's looking a little dirty in there. So now I'm hoping when I tear that apart that that hub isn't worn out. That'd be bad. Now there's always something, right? Just that one little thing that gives you an issue, and it's this bottom A-arm mounting bolt here. It's pushed in from the front, and of course this whole bumper gets in the way, so I can't pop it out. I'm gonna have to remove this, or just at least undo the bottom mounts and sort of try to flip it up a little bit so I can get that bolt out. Do you ever notice how much effort sometimes it takes just to get one bolt out? This is awesome. My fingers. There we go. Okay, that bottom bolt is being a bit of a pain in the butt, so I'm going to take out this shock, and then I have an idea to get this bottom one out. Get this top A-arm out. So I know what's happened to that bottom A-arm. Never had one of these apart before, but inside this bushing, there's a metal sleeve, so obviously that bolt has more or less rusted, kind of welded itself to that inner sleeve. Now it won't come out, everything's spinning inside there. So, more heat. So since this bolt is actually seized inside the bushing, I'm gonna cut it off. Just to get access into here, I'm gonna pop this axle out. Just gonna show you how to do it. Push it in, give it a quick jerk. You can see that there's just a little retaining clip or a little C-clip, circlip, holds it in place. That's it. Well, that was a pain in the butt, but that's the way things go sometimes, especially on these older machines. I'm just going to pop out those old bushings, put the new ones in, put them back into place, put the hub back on, we're good to go. I had a bunch of difficulties pulling this all apart because, you know what, there's a little bit of rust in this. So I'm just going to put the never seize on. I want to make sure that we'll be able to get this apart in the future. Just putting in our new bushings. Everybody knows these start to squeak after a while, so not much you can do about it, but that's just a little bit of preventive Maintenance right here. I decided to go with new Polaris inner bushings as well because I had to cut out the old ones. A little nasty. I'll lube those up as well. And the part that gave me the biggest problem was the bolt seizing inside that bushing. Once that happened, you can't get the bolt out and you have to start cutting. Get this bottom arm on. Put that axle back in. So it's pretty easy to do. You just line up your splines, give her a jam. That's it. Now this 700 HD is a pretty good machine. Keely's had this for a while now. It's an 07. It's got a lot of power. Now it's time to work on this hub. Got to get that bearing out, get this separated, check it out, but I'm seeing an issue, and I'll show you what I mean. Now as I spin this, you'll notice that the splined inner part of the outer hub doesn't move, but the bearing actually rolls around it, and that's not good. The bearing is actually supposed to be moving like that. I'm just putting some side pressure on it. That's the bearing movement that should be normal. But what we have here is some rocking motion, and that's not a good sign. See the bearing actually split. Full of water. And the inner part of this bearing is probably going to be seized to that hub. Wow. There is a circlip holding this bearing in. You got to really watch this thing because if it lets go, it'll easily take an eye out. Make sure that when you're taking out, you got your hand over it. There we go. Guy dropped this off. It's called Glide. It's penetrant. Put that on there. Let that sit for a couple minutes, and then we'll try to pound that out. It should come out pretty easily. Usually, if you want to get this out, if it's really stuck, you can heat this up, and it should pop out pretty easily. Now it's time to put that hub together. I'll show you how to do that. Now I'll just get this ready. So I had an issue earlier. As you saw, the bearing sort of got seized in there, and I had to cut it out with my plasma cutter. There's a bunch of residue in there. I'm just going to go in with the wire wheeler and clean it out. Any little bits of corrosion or whatever will keep that bearing from going in. Now there are a couple different ways to put this bearing in. So number one is this. If the hub assembly here is room temperature and the bearing is room temperature, it's a compressed kind of fit, so you're gonna have to push it in with a press. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna heat this up with a torch, just warm it up. I'm not gonna go crazy with it. Then I'm gonna pull that bearing out of the freezer, see if I can drop it in there. This is the outer part of the bearing that I extracted out of this housing. Now what I did was, I cut it out with the plasma cutter. You see that cut in it? That's what we're going to use to press in the new bearing. So it's exactly the right size, but because it's got that cut out of it, it's actually, you know, it'll compress a little bit so I can pop it back out. And it's not going to get stuck in there with the new bearing. I do that with all my wheel bearings on my trucks. And you can see it's pressed right in there. Pops right out. And when you're putting this one back in, be careful. Wear your glasses and keep your mouth closed. Keep your lips down over your teeth because these things will bust a chiclet right out of you. Before you install that hub back on the hub assembly, make sure you put your brake rotor on. You don't want to forget that. Get everything together, then you're going to have to take it all apart to get this back. These rotor bolts. Now there's going to be a little bit of, I don't know, feedback on here, a little bit of dragging, but once everything's pulled together, it's going to be nice and tight. You won't get that noise. And the first thing I like to do is actually slip the hub on. And then tighten this up. Okay, now this is a very important part. Pay attention to this. Before you put this on and all this stuff back together, make sure that you place your brake where it needs to go. And on this one, there's a little black cap that retains the lines onto the front arm. Put that out of there. This goes underneath. You don't have to put it on right away, but at least get it under. Okay. Check your pads while you're in here. These aren't too bad. So all I have left to do now is just put that winch bumper back on, tighten everything up for Keely, and then we're good to go. I gotta thank you guys for coming, checking out how to replace the bushings and the bearings in the front end here. Pretty easy job. You might run into some issues if you've got, you know, rust in your area, rust belt kind of stuff. But that's just the life of the guy who likes to play in the mud or in the snow and have fun in the water and all that. Things are gonna get rusty, and that's just the way it is. So make sure you guys come back to PowerModz. As always, we're gonna have some pretty cool videos for you. I gotta thank you for watching. Check us out on Facebook and give us a thumbs up on this video, would you? Thanks very much. So it wasn't just as easy as throwing the tires back on because we forgot to install the studs on the wheel hubs. Feel pretty stupid about that, but at least you get to see that in my video. Everybody makes mistakes, eh guys?
Even me.
Yeah, even you. Okay, so let's take this for a drive, see how she runs.